Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delilah Lugo.
I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
Hey, Delilah, what game are we talking about today?
The game of write-in and submissions.
Oh, that's
The
a
game
is
of
that
life.
an indie game? Is that one of those indie jams that's out there right now? Is that gonna be nominated for best indie at the Game Awards in a few weeks?
Nope,
Probably
just
probably not. Yeah, this is a different one. This is something we've never done before. Last month we asked all of you listeners to write in to reap the spoils. And a lot of you did, and we have a whole slew of topics and conversation things and questions to answer and talk about. So big thank you to everybody that wrote in. This is gonna be fun.
yes.
It's gonna be different. It's gonna be interesting.
I'm
I know
Interesting, yes.
Ja-
excited.
Jason's real pumped. I can tell. Jason's so excited.
I'm already looking through, just trying to come up with answers to some of it. Some very existential questions.
Yeah, we got some someone wrote in with like a full ass game for us to do. Like it's intense. So we're gonna see. I think we'll be able to get through all this stuff. We'll see. Hopefully, I don't have to cut anything out. And I'll throw it out there. If you ever have any more questions that you want to write into us with, not many people did this, but feel free to email us at dcellmedia@gmail.com. I'll make sure that that's in the description. If you ever just want to write into us with anything, like do it, and maybe eventually we'll have enough emails and enough questions to do something like this again.
Yeah.
Right.
When
If the channels are just open and things are coming in continuously while we do our normal programming, we'll be able to regularly answer, interact. Perhaps we'll address comments. Probably not.
have the roast of Jason Kwasnicki, where we just read all the mean comments about Jason.
I
All the
They're
actually
not
it
all
just
mean. I have some fans out there.
That's true. You
It's
do.
true.
Some stalwart fans on some of the most divisive videos.
No one is as big a fan of you though as me, Jason.
I know.
That's what I'm
Aw.
throwing out there right now. Putting out that positivity.
The bromance is eternal.
That just made me think, like, if we, because we announced the episode that we're spoiling every episode prior so that people can play the game along with us. And
Yeah.
like, what if people wrote in questions for the episode that we're gonna do? Like, if they had any like talking points that they
Oh,
wanted
that's
to
actually a
add.
really good
Hey,
idea.
that
Yeah.
would be sick. That would be great. Maybe, maybe we're just brainstorming
Cooking.
new like directions and ideas. We're like, how many years into this show are we now? It's like 5 years into this podcast, almost 6 years into this podcast, and boom, Delilah's got some genius ideas this late into the game. Awesome. Yeah, so maybe we'll start doing stuff like that. Whatever. It's you know, we're totally new to this. We're such newbies. Um, but yeah, like that's a great idea. And I'm also not opposed to people that want to write in. We have gotten some comments before with game suggestions of people that suggest like something they want us to cover and talk about. Some I'm into more than others for sure. Like I was re-looking at some old comments and saw like someone mentioned that they'd love us to cover the Red Dead games, and I think that's great. I would love to do that.
Oh, hell
Um,
yeah.
but then there's also that one guy, and nothing against you, fella, but wants us to cover the Callisto Protocol, and I'm like, well, I have a feeling that one's gonna be not good. So I'm less inclined to play and talk about that one, but I'm open to suggestions. I'm always open to suggestions.
Yeah, totally.
As long as it's not like something that's gonna take me 250 hours to play through.
I'm open
I
to
guess that
playing what
extends
you
out to
guys
all
want
of
me
you.
to play, as long as I don't want to play it. Or wait, no, as long as I do
As
want to
long as
play it
I do want to
already.
play it.
Yeah. So don't write in about Kingdom Hearts.
Hey, no, write it about Kingdom Hearts. If I can get these two to play Kingdom Hearts, that would make me so happy.
I
I played
have played Kingdom Hearts,
Yeah,
by the way,
I
but
played Kingdom Hearts when it came out, and
That way,
All I'll ever need of
this
Kingdom Hearts.
if we could literally do an episode on Kingdom Hearts, so I can tell both of you you're absolutely wrong about how about them. Like, well, okay, maybe the first few. All right, I'll definitely be more critical once we get past like two.
Mm.
But anyway, moving on. We have questions to talk about. We have conversation topics to talk about. So, yeah, I guess I don't really have like a planned order or anything. I'm gonna actually throw this one to Delilah, because there's a
Sh-
personal connection there. Delilah, do you want to read Maddie Omega's question?
Sure. So Maddie Omega, who is also my partner, wrote
Haha.
in and said, "What's a game you put down and never pick back up for whatever reason? What would make you go back to it?" So I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
Oh wow, you highlighted it in real time. That freaked me out.
We're so
I was
technically
like,
proficient.
did I
Yes.
do that?
Like, it's amazing. Google Docs. It's crazy.
Um, so this one's hard for me because I generally finish all my games, and if I don't finish a game, it's because I don't intend to.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm trying to think of a
So,
game that I put down. So for example,
so
I'm
first
thinking
things
of
first, I think you
Mhm.
need to go leave the room real quick, yell at Matt for giving us such a difficult question. Tell him how dare you.
He knows this too because he's seen me like viciously beat games, um, even if I hate them.
Yeah.
Although I will say, as I've gotten older, I've been less less like that. Like if I like, I think I'm thinking of what's that weird game, JJR Geiger. Wow, I said that name wrong.
What?
H.R. Geiger.
HR Geiger.
I
Sorry,
feel like you were just like combining George R. R. Martin and
Yeah.
H.R.
I
Geiger in like
totally
some weird
was.
way.
I totally was.
Oh Jesus! I mean, if you've actually read George R. R. Martin, like the books, the Song of Ice and Fire, or any of his other works, like George R. R. Martin already has such a vividly horrific imagination. Adding H.R. Geiger into that mix, oh my god!
Well, hey, I
Anyway,
mean,
go ahead with what you were saying, Delilah.
speaking of putting down things and never picking them back up, George R. R. Martin. No, I'm just.
Yeah, exactly. There is a counter, and it's
That's
like
funny.
over a decade, very much so over a decade. But anyway,
Yeah.
Delilah, keep going. You were going on a roll.
So that HR Geiger type game
Oh,
that came
are you
out,
talking about Scorn?
Scorn, yeah. I
Yeah. Okay.
started Scorn and I was like, holy shit, this is boring. And so I put it down and I'm never gonna play it again. Now the caveat is I didn't actually buy the game. I played it on Game Pass, so I felt
Yeah.
better about doing that.
That's fine. Yeah. I mean, it still fits the brief, right? You picked it up, you put it down, and I guess the follow-up question is what would get you to pick it back up? Is if you actually like spent real money on it, or
Nothing. If I had spent money on it, I might have picked it up
okay.
again and played it and saw it through, but yeah, that's just one example. I mean, there's been a few other games that I've just not picked back up because I just rather not waste my time on mediocre games. But I most of the time I will see, well, not mediocre, on bad games because Scorn is a bad game. But I would much rather spend my time on a game that I'm enjoying, and I've got more and more picky about that as I've gotten older. There are some
Good.
games that I started though that I haven't finished, like related to the Kingdom Hearts conversation. I started playing Kingdom Hearts 1 again, and I never finished that.
Oh,
And then I
that's the
also
best
started
one
playing
though.
Dark Souls 1 again, and I haven't finished it, but I plan to go back to those. So it's not, what would get me back to them is if we had a freaking drought in video games. That would be nice because then I could
Or
clean that up.
I mean, I can give you the answer I was gonna eventually say for probably one of mine, which is we do an episode on it, so you're forced to play it.
Jason would love that.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, we do an episode on Kingdom Hearts. I'm down.
Yeah, you might find me having some technical difficulties. Actually, you know what? With the first one, I wouldn't be so opposed.
The first one is my favorite, and in my opinion, the best. For reasons. I mean, if we ever do an episode on it, I'll give all my reasons, and I do. I do really love like Kingdom Hearts 2. I think Kingdom Hearts 2 is just a hair behind Kingdom Hearts 1 in terms of the best of that series.
Hmm.
Um it's after Kingdom Hearts 2 where I get extremely opinionated. I'm even a huge Chain of Memories fan. I love Chain of Memories. Anyway, we're really getting sidetracked here. Jason, game that you put down and haven't
Actually,
picked back up.
Delilah gave me the time and inspiration to find the perfect answer to this question, and it's going to be a little spicy. I know it's going to piss some people off, especially for the Mister. I want my turn-based JRPGs back. Persona 5
Ah, that is a
is a
good one for
game
you.
is a
Mm.
game that I picked up and put down.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore that game in terms of its style, its aesthetic, its music, the combat system, the actual dungeons. And it was the first time I've known prior to P5 when it came out and was really, big. It was kind of the first Persona game to really blow up and become mainstream.
Yeah.
But I had been aware of the series beforehand. I just never picked one up to play, going all the way back to like
It's like
P2 and P3.
four Persona 4 Golden kind of came close
Yeah,
to really hitting the
but that
zeitgeist,
that
but
was like handheld. That
yeah, because
yeah.
that was only Golden specifically came out on Vita, and like that was like at the time the reason to buy a Vita, but it was at the same time the reason to buy a Vita, so
You're
not a
right.
whole lot of people were gonna go through with that purchase. But
But the reason I ended up putting P5 down and never coming back was because as much as I love the combat, the dungeons, the world building, the story in between, I fucking hate that like more than half the game is fucking life sim. I can't fucking stand this life sim shit. Um and it's not like you can just skip over it. It's pretty integral to like progression systems that have to do with like the actual combat. Um
You don't want to go on a date with the doctor girl?
No,
no,
and
hold on, Delilah. Hold on,
it's also
Delilah.
really another part of it that really weirds me out is that these Persona games, these are like high schoolers, unless look, some of the characters are even younger, and some of the shit that goes on is like a little off-putting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Persona 5 gets very because I actually just that would have been a really good answer for me if we did this episode like 2 years ago, because last year I played through Persona 5, like actually committed to finishing it, and it gets dark, like really really
Hmm.
adult dark subject matter. Even within like the first palace is like
Well,
a gym
I w-
teacher that is
yeah,
sexually abusing his students, you know?
that wasn't what I was more referring to. Just like the idea of role playing and like dating and stuff. Young kids, it feels a little weird. What you're referring to, like I'm fine with that. Like the story, like having it be like, because that's the villain. I mean, that whole section you're referring to is kind
I
of like the tutorial section. And
I
it's
know.
one big long tutorial section of the game.
Yeah, I know what you're
Um,
saying. It's just really funny to hear you say, like, oh, I'm fine with the dungeon about the sexually abusive
no,
gym
yeah, yeah.
teacher.
But that's a
The thing
villain.
that
Like you're
weirds me out is dating girls. That's so strange.
no. I more mean like
I know.
the RPing of it. Like having that the setup for the villain be he's
Yeah.
sexually abusing minors is fine because you're taking them down.
Right. Right.
Um, But yeah, it's really just life sim. Like if there was no life sim shit, I'd be all about the Persona 5 or Persona in general gameplay and, you know, the aesthetic and the themes and the world building. It's just I can't stand that life sim stuff. Like I'm so happy that I can skip over most of it in like Yakuza.
So I actually kind of I just started this, and it still has this stuff. It's basically Persona, but in a completely different setting. But I do think you would like Metaphor ReFantazio better than Persona.
Yeah, I
Because
haven't picked it up yet, but
I
I
mean,
know what you're saying.
for starters, there's no dating in that game. Like it's much more just about like growing a following and finding companions that will just rally behind you. And I mean, so far I'm not very far in the game, but like the life sim stuff isn't so much life sim stuff. It's just deciding what you do during different parts of the day. It's like I guess that literally is like describing life sim mechanics and stuff like that, but it's not like the same way that Persona is, where you have to decide between studying and doing your homework and
Right.
going and hanging out with your friends,
You're on a
or
train. Which song are you going to listen to? Depending on which song you choose, you'll get a stat boost permanently
all
to,
right, first of
yeah,
all, that's not in the game. It's books. You decide what
or
book you want to
books.
read when
Sorry,
you're on the
what book
train.
you want to read. Well, yeah.
But yeah, I think you might like Metaphor more for the reasons you basically just
I
outlined.
definitely have had my eye on it. I was just hesitant because I knew it was Atlas and I knew it was the same team. Yeah.
Yeah, it so far. Delilah, did you start that at all, or
Metaphor, no.
oh
I'm
god.
yeah, I'm still making my way through Black Myth Wukong, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and
Okay.
yeah, those two games. So I'm kind of like holding off on any other games before I finish those.
I mean, for the record, I'd love to do an episode on Metaphor, but that's also a 100-hour RPG.
Oh
So
my
I'm down.
god.
I
whenever
might.
you guys are ready.
Hey, if you guys want to commit to an episode like a couple months down the line just to give time, I'm down to
Yeah.
play it. Like
Well,
it's like I said, I've had my eye on it, and a lot of people have been talking about it as like a game of the year contender or
yeah,
whatever. So
it really is. I think I kind of think it's gonna. It might not win, but it's gonna be nominated for a lot of things. I think.
That's great.
Yeah.
it's also interesting to see Atlas kind of branch out and do something and like that team, the Persona team, do something completely different.
Well, is it completely different? Because it basically is Persona, but in a fantasy setting.
Yeah, but still, you know what I'm saying.
I no, I know what you're saying. They're
Isn't
doing Persona, not Persona.
Yeah,
It's
isn't there like a hardcore Persona game um made by Atlas as well? It's like if you're really good at these games, you play this. It's the same thing.
Shin
It has like
Megami
a
Tensei,
yeah,
Shin
the
Megami
original
Tensei, yeah.
series.
that's the original. Like Persona is a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei,
Yeah,
Right.
which is hilarious considering how much more popular Persona is versus the series it's technically a spin-off of.
yeah,
But
because
yeah,
the Persona games are like all kind of like kids high school, whereas like the Shin Megami Tensei is like more straight up, to my knowledge.
Shin Megami Tensei is like straight up like demon negotiation.
Yeah,
You are yeah, you're negotiating with demons, and it's a like usually a lot more like I guess
it
dungeon
leans way
focused,
more
combat
into the
focused.
horror and the
Yeah.
dungeons. Yeah,
Whereas
Cool.
Persona's it's got that other half. It's got that life sim aspect to it, where you're balancing being a high school student and a whatever going into dungeons and still doing demon negotiation, but I believe the demon negotiation is a lot more dumbed down in Persona versus Shin Megami Tensei.
Got it.
But yeah, Atlas had a banger year, man, because Persona 3 Reload came out, Unicorn Overlord, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, now Metaphor. Like Atlas is really cooking this year. Um, and there's still those rumors of Persona 6 right being a reveal being right around the corner. Maybe the Game Awards, we'll see, but
I
I don't
think
know.
they are going to announce Persona 6 at the Game Awards.
Could be. Could be. As soon as we see the color green, everyone's gonna lose their fucking minds.
Oh yeah.
So, um, going back to the question, I kind of struggled to answer or find a good answer to this. I think the best answer I can give, and Jason, this might break your heart. Um, I have never beaten Final Fantasy VIII.
Doesn't break my heart, but
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad
I
we
can
can still be
I
friends.
can definitely understand why.
Yeah, I think I've tried many a time, and the furthest
Look,
I got, I think, was the
Final Fantasy
three.
Final Fantasy 8, it's like Fredo, like from The Godfather. For people who don't understand the reference, like you love Fredo, he's your brother, but at the same time, he's an idiot and he betrays you and almost gets you all killed.
I like I think the thing that the reason I always bounced off 8 is, I mean, first of all, I don't really like the junction system. I like
Oh yeah,
Tale
the
as old as
progression and
time.
gameplay, yeah, it's so easy to break and so weird and
Yeah.
yeah.
Not a fan of that, but really it's like the completionist in me gets so caught up in triple triad and like trying to get all the cards. It kind of became overwhelming and a little frustrating when I would lose and then lose a rare card. The last time I played, I think I made it to disc 3 and bounced off of it, and that was a long time ago. Like probably almost a decade ago. So I am definitely due to that, and Final Fantasy 11 are the only mainline Final Fantasy games I have not beaten. So it's definitely on my pretty immediate to-do list to actually commit to finishing 8.
Out of
Especially since
curiosity,
like
do you know like how the story, like all the beats of the
so
story?
I don't know past a certain point. That's something that I've kind of like I mean, I've seen like, the Squall is dead theory. I've seen like certain screenshots and clips from the ending, but like out of context, that stuff is so nebulous and crazy. And I know certain other like events that happen, but again, out of context, I don't really know much about them and why they occur. So I've managed to keep myself relatively in the dark so I can still be
Gotcha.
somewhat surprised when I go through it. And
This
really
is
get
kind of a
into it.
revelation, and I've made so many references to so many stupid plot points in Final Fantasy VIII that I don't know now in retrospect. I assumed you knew what I was talking about, but you
I
might
mean,
not have.
there are a lot of things that I do know, like a lot of big plot points. I would imagine anything you would bring up, I would know about. But anyway, and it's not like I don't like 8 in certain regards. I think 8's soundtrack is one of the best in the series.
Oh, it's the best. Yeah.
Oh, I don't. It's not. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it is definitely like top 5.
I guess when I say, I shouldn't say the best. Um, I would say it has within it the best work that Uematsu has ever done composition wise.
Okay,
Some certain specific tracks.
that's fair.
Um,
That's fair.
Overall, yeah, I think, yeah, I wouldn't say
And
the soundtrack overall is the best.
like I feel like it's also not super debatable. Like 8's opening cutscene is like one of the best openings in the series.
Mm.
Hmm.
Um, it's like there's a lot of good things in 8. There's also just a lot of things that I don't drive with that have kept me from committing to finishing it. And that it's like I could answer the second question, what would make me go back to it? Just like sheer commitment to the franchise is going to make me go
Right.
back to it. Like Final Fantasy is my soul. Like of course I'm going to eventually go and actually see it through. Um
Yeah.
I guess another example that's a little harder to get me to actually commit to going back to, sticking with Kingdom Hearts, is Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2. It's the only Kingdom Hearts
Mm.
game besides the mobile game that I haven't beaten, and it's because I genuinely don't like that game. Um,
Yeah, it's boring.
it's like I, there's a lot of people that really love that one. I don't. I really don't like it. I've never been a fan of it, and I've never even gotten very far in it.
Yeah.
So, what would get me to go back to it if we do an episode on it? Anyway.
Can I just real quick, I just remembered another game that I probably would go back to, which is Dying Light 2. I never
Oh,
actually beat that game. I didn't like it a lot. However, I was on kind of a cooperative journey with someone to platinum the game, and they can only get the platinum if I play with them because they're playing on my game. So I would do it for him and him only. That will require me to not have an adult life, which I don't know if I could go backwards. So
yeah, yeah, it's tough.
Just thinking of all the ways you can use that for blackmail.
yeah.
Especially, I'm assuming this other person is like the way you guys,
Oh no,
well,
he's
more
worse than
used to
us.
be. Oh yeah, okay. So I was gonna
He's
say you could use so much blackmail to be had there.
yeah, no, he has like 300 something platinums and he's constantly like playing and yeah, no, it's
Does he got me beat? How many do I have? I'm at 213. Damn it.
yeah.
Man. All right. Hey Jason, why don't you take the question at the top of the list from Hicks 299?
All right. So Hicks299 says, "Okay, since you've asked for a suggestion of a topic, here is one exclusively for the medium of video games: cutscene incompetence.
Ooh.
I do think it increases the ludonarrative dissonance between gameplay and cutscenes in which your playable character is powerful during gameplay, but the moment a cutscene appears, the playable character is portrayed as incompetent. It is egregious in Final Fantasy 16, Xenoblade, Metal Gear Solid, the series as a whole, Death Stranding, among others. So I can't speak to Xenoblade, and I think
Well, are there any like examples that that do spring to mind for you, I guess?
no. I definitely get what he's saying. I
Mhm.
think it all comes down to execution because I'm trying to think. He's talking about Final Fantasy, like something like Final Fantasy 16, where like 1 minute in gameplay, you're just you're tearing shit up, you're tearing through enemies, and then in the next cutscene, like what was his name?
Yeah, your ass kicked.
I'm trying to remember the name of the specific character. It doesn't matter, but yeah, like Delilah says, you get your ass kicked by a new enemy.
Hugo,
But
Barnabas.
Barnabas, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Like he just like cuts the scene too, and but
Oh yeah.
again, in the execution, like you're kind of moving up the ladder of power level of enemies. Um, so there's kind of an excuse. The same with like I'm thinking of an example from Metal Gear where like 1 minute you're moving through an area, you're stealthing out, taking out enemies, you fight the Ocelot squad, and then all of a sudden like you're getting swarmed by bees and you got like all these fucking you know what I'm saying. I don't want to give away too much for people who haven't played through the excellent Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, but like there is a clear power differential. Um and it's made clear that these characters that are now overpowering you are like veterans with years, if not decades, of experience. So it's execution. I can understand what he's saying, where it might come off as like we need this character to fail or not be able to do something, so we're going to inexplicably make them incompetent here. I definitely get what he's talking about. Um, I'm just in the specific things he pointed out. I don't even really remember much of Death Stranding stories, so who cares? But
Yeah, I don't
um,
really remember much about that one. I think a good example, though it's a really kind of early video game, is like the first Resident Evil.
Mm.
Where I
yeah,
feel like in cutscenes, like especially like Jill is just like portrayed as like a total ditz in a lot of the cutscenes.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
like then you get into gameplay and it's like, no, you're surviving this zombie outbreak in this mansion, and you can like, I guess as much as a 1996 PS1 game will allow you to be, you can be a total badass taking those zombies down and eventually monsters. Um,
Yeah, they did the same thing with Lara Croft and the Tomb Raider, like later Tomb Raider games,
yeah,
where
the
she's just like,
reboots.
yeah, she's like bucking off, killing all these things with her bow and arrow or her shotgun, and then in the cutscene, she just gets absolutely destroyed.
Yeah. I feel like it's really funny. When I read this question, I the first thing that sprang to mind for me was actually the opposite, where
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of games,
like Uncharted, famously back in the
well,
day.
Uncharted's a little unique because a lot of the cinematics it like still puts you somewhat in control of, or the gameplay is so cinematic that like there's cutscenes, but there's also lots of just these very set piecey moments that almost look like cutscenes, but you still have like some level of control. And
Hmm.
Nate's the dissonance between cutscene Nate and player controlled Nate is relatively even, just because like there's lots of moments in both where he'll bumble around, or lots of moments in both where he'll get himself out of a really sticky situation
Yeah,
in the
I
coolest
think
way
we've
possible.
I
But
think we talked about it in our actual discussion on those games.
yeah,
While people talked a lot about ludonarrative dissonance, I only that's why I brought it up. Is just
yeah,
because
yeah,
people talked a lot about it back during the day when they first came out.
yeah.
I never had a
But
problem with it because it was kind of tonally like that. That was just Uncharted. That's what it was. Like
yeah,
so,
right.
it fit. It felt it's like watching an Indiana Jones movie where Indiana Jones blows up a fucking tank and kills dozens of German, SS soldiers and is jousting with motorcycles. Like it's
Yeah.
the tone of the story. That's what it is.
Yeah. But going back to what I was saying, like the first thing that sprang to mind for me was like the opposite, where in a cutscene, your character appears like super badass, like they're capable of doing anything, and then gameplay starts and that goes away.
Mhm.
And like weirdly, the example that always springs to mind for me is Dirge of Cerberus.
Mm.
The opening of that game is like Vincent jumping around all like rooftops and doing all sorts of like cool vampire shooty bang bang moves and stuff, and then the gameplay starts and you can't even jump. And it's this really clunky third person shooter,
Yeah.
and it's just like, where was
There's
that level
also,
of control I had in the cutscene, you know?
to be
It's not there.
with that game, there's also like a preconception of Vincent Valentine from Final Fantasy VII and the power levels. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but still, like my point being is that cutscene Vincent in that game is not the same as gameplay Vincent in that game. At least not at the very beginning, or probably for the first half.
Hey,
Um,
just trying to play devil's advocate.
yeah, I mean, hey, we're gonna find out one day, because one day they're gonna remaster that game, and I'm gonna force y'all to play it.
For me, ludonarrative dissonance bothers me more so when it's skin. For example, in like Spider-Man, where like there would be like a real serious, intense, emotional cutscene, but then he's wearing like a silly suit. And it's just like, I can't even get into this cutscene right now. I wish that games would just force you to, or actually revert back to the original suit. Actually, I think Black Myth Wukong does this, where no matter what armor you're wearing, you'll always see his face during cutscenes, so that you feel like the intensity of the emotion.
Right. Keep uniformity in terms of the narrative.
See,
Yeah.
Jason, that shit drives me crazy in Final Fantasy 14. Like, if there's certain helms and stuff, like if it's covering my character's face, I just have to hide the headgear, because I don't want my character's face covered in
Hmm.
cutscenes.
Well, they do give, yeah. To be fair, they do give you that option, but
Yeah, but it's like,
you got to
sometimes the
remember to do
headgear is
it. Yeah.
cool, and having to toggle it on and off manually before going in, knowing that I'm going into a cutscene, it's like, it's kind of frustrating. But
Yeah.
clearly, Delilah, you haven't spent enough time watching like playthroughs of like Resident Evil 2, where Leon is modded to be wearing a swimsuit, and
Oh.
Mr. X is modded to be wearing a banana hammock and coming after you. Clearly, you haven't watched enough of those types of
At least
videos.
at least those are fan made. I can't even blame the developers for that.
Well, you can. They did allow the games
They
to
did
be
allow it.
modded. They
Yes.
almost encourage it.
The other point where it bothers me is sometimes there'll be like a final boss fight, and I don't mind a challenging final boss. In fact, I prefer it, but there's sometimes where a specific cutscene will be so cool, and if you die, it just takes away from the intensity of that moment. And then you gotta like keep going through it, and it just makes, as you keep dying, and I can't remember exactly what game, but I feel like it was one that we discussed within the past 3 years, where every time I died it just reduced the intensity of that entire cutscene.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes it's better to just create certain sequences where you're just guaranteed to win no matter what, just so
Wait, you're
that,
talking about dying during gameplay, like
yeah,
after the
so
cutscene, and you have to rewatch the cutscene.
You
So
know what?
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. And there was a
Which
game that came out early this year.
Oh, earlier this year. I was thinking
Yeah,
a game that came out earlier last year. What
it's a
game are you
Final
thinking
Fantasy. It's
of?
a Final Fantasy game. I just don't want to spoil in case the
Oh,
person
you know
oh.
what?
we all mentioned the problem with that specific.
I didn't even think
Yeah.
about that one, but yeah, that is a good example. My mind went to uh a Star Wars game that we covered last year.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think they both suffered from that
Yeah,
actually.
they
Final
do.
Fantasy VII and also
God damn it, Delilah! I was
oh
trying so
wait.
hard not to spoil.
I mean,
Wait,
there's just a cutscene that, you might die in a fight and then have to rewatch the cutscene, and then it kind of devalues the cutscene. It's like, that's not really spoiling much,
yeah,
but
my bad.
yeah. No, it's
No,
fine.
no, yeah.
Fine, it's fine. All right, let's go to another question. I'll read this one out. It's from Nico42PA. Wrote, thoughts on the PS5 Pro reveal. Are Sony justified in their pricing? Also, general thoughts on the generation so far. Uh, I have some thoughts on this. I have a lot of thoughts on this. But do you guys like what do you guys like cuz I know Jason, I know you're definitely not as like deep in the weeds as I am, and Delilah, you've kind of crawled yourself out of the weeds.
Yeah.
Lucky you. So like, do you guys know much about the PS5 Pro and like the whole situation?
I know.
No. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Delilah.
I was just gonna say I know there was a lot like when they first talked about it. There was a lot of lack of justification for the price point. Um, and then
Yeah.
eventually,
No, go ahead.
uh,
Go ahead.
well, yeah, go ahead since you know more.
Well, so
I know
so
something.
let me paint a picture of last generation, right? The PS4 comes out in 2013 and launches at $400. It's a 1080p console. So like games are optimized how they can be, but like the max resolution it can go is 1080p because this is 2013 we're talking about. 4K exists, but it's not like in every household. And mid-generation 4K becomes more affordable and people are starting to get 4K displays. So what does Sony do? They put out a PS4 Pro. And that PS4 Pro is now capable of 4K resolution, potentially higher frame rates. They're giving more options, HDR cut for color, and they lower the price of the PS4, the base PS4, so that they can launch the PS4 Pro at $400, the same price that the PS4 was 3 years prior.
Mhm.
Right? That all sounds pretty cool, right? That all sounds pretty good. And that was a pretty big jump because we're going from 1080p up to 4K. That's a
Mhm.
pretty large jump in resolution. With the PS5, it's a console that can do 4K and can typically have like again depending on game optimization it can have higher frame rates at 4K resolution, but even that is typically not guaranteed and very less likely, right? We're still having to choose between a performance mode or a fidelity mode. So either you're getting 4K 30 frames or you're getting 1080 or sometimes 1440p at 60 frames. That's usually the trade-off that you're making and that we've been making for the past 4 years.
Mhm.
So this PS4 or this PS5 Pro comes out, and the big claim to fame that it's doing is, okay, you no longer will have to choose between fidelity and performance modes. You'll get, depending on game optimization, you'll potentially get 4K 60 or somewhere around that. They're not like truly running at that because that's all using like a machine learning technology called PSSR to like try and kind of not emulate but use machine learning to try and like smooth things out so it's reaching that higher resolution with that higher frame rate. Um and it's $200 more than the PS5. So it's not like this massive leap forward and it's more expensive. And as now that this thing is out, um a lot of people have been getting it, doing their own impressions, getting their own kind of reviews and forming their own opinions. There's not many games that are that big of a jump forward to really justify spending the extra $200 to get this box over a base PS5. It's like the one game that I pretty much consistently hear is like a drastic improvement is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And
Mm.
it's less a selling point for the PS5 Pro and much more an
A
indictment of
criticism of the game, yeah.
yeah, it's much
Right.
more an indictment of the optimization of Rebirth because I didn't really have many problems with like playing Rebirth in performance mode, but like looking back at footage, like yeah, it does look a little ugly, a little muddy,
Yeah.
um, in hindsight, and
Yeah,
like
bottom line is that the generation, like within the generations, there haven't been as, and even across the generations, haven't been as large of a leap with the Pro, as you pointed out. And I'm hearing all this for the first time. I've paid zero attention to the PS5 Pro discussion. I know that there was some controversy, but based on what Mark's saying, with the advent of 4K and actual 4K displays, there was an actual impetus for PS4 Pro, and it was
Yeah.
dealt with fairly. Uh, PS5 Pro seems like a cash in and an attempt to prolong a generation where
And even like just to interrupt there, like even that's a little fuzzy and it's not like quite black and white because the other problem right now is that with AI having such a large uptick in the past year or two, there's a massive demand for silicone.
Mhm.
And the pricing for this thing is most likely justified on Sony's side because it's likely what they have to charge for it in order to remotely break even on these things.
Right, because
Like,
generally, for people who don't know, generally consoles are loss leaders, so they sell at a
mhm,
loss up front, and they make money for these companies on the back end with
software.
games software. Yeah,
But that's the other problem is the last first party game, another game of the year contender that Sony put out, was Astrobot, and the one before that was such a massive failure that it shut down after 2 weeks, and that was Concord.
Mm.
And then you could argue like Helldivers 2, not made by an in-house like first party studio, but PlayStation published it, so it's like you could kind of count
yeah,
that, but then you start really going back, like what was the last first party game Sony put out?
right.
It's kind of been a while.
Yeah, that's what I was debating whether or not to get into because that's a whole nother conversation and one that's been people have been having a lot, not just with Sony, but just with the status of AAA gaming in general.
Yeah.
Rising cost, rising development times.
But like it plays into your point it plays into your point that like these consoles can't really sell them at a loss so much anymore because they're not putting out software fast enough to
Right,
justify that.
right.
So like this price, they likely have to put it out at this price. But that doesn't mean we have to buy it at this price.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not buying PS5
And
Pro. Fuck, I
yeah,
waited as long as I could to buy a PS5 to begin with.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, that's true.
For me, it's like I honestly thought that by the end of the PS5 life cycle, we would start to see that anyway, without having to buy a whole new console. I don't know if it was like my own fault in not doing my research, but when I first got the PS5, I was like, oh yeah, by the end of it, we'll be able to play games in 4K 60, and it'll be great. Now they're just releasing a whole new console to do that,
And it's not even consistently doing that
and
because
it's not consistently doing it, and they didn't release like I feel like if they release maybe like I don't know, a Death Stranding or a new Bloodborne game along with it, a side by side, it would be more enticing because then like people want to be able to experience. Oh wow,
I
Bloodborne's
meing,
coming out in 60
yeah, I
frames.
mean,
You know what I mean?
Bloodborne's
yeah.
a little different just because of how long people have been asking for a remaster in 60 FPS for Bloodborne.
And
In
it gets
general, it's
pushed
kind of a
back by a month every single time someone asks. That game isn't
yeah,
coming
and
out until like
but in general,
3249.
you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you do some kind of remaster, because people are already bitching about the remasters and coming out with this PS5 Pro and then trying to sell it with remasters of games that have already had multiple remasters that people are already getting sick of.
Yeah.
Leaving aside like legitimate remakes and remaster, like the recent RE4 Resident Evil remakes where they're completely redoing the games, or we're just talking about what's been happening with Sony that people have been criticizing.
Yeah. And like
But
it go ahead,
sorry.
Delilah.
No, no,
Uh,
go ahead. I was just
yeah,
gonna.
well, yeah, like to talk about what you just said, Jason. Like, yeah, they didn't put out any like new software with this thing. It was just here's a list of 50 games that have come out, in the past 4 years or so that are optimized for this box.
That
And it's
may
like,
or may not
okay,
look better. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh great, I can't wait to replay all these games for a few minutes just to see how they look on my $700 box. And then
Yeah.
like and then like we haven't even gotten to my personal biggest sticking point, which is this is a $700 box that's digital only or initially out of the box. The disk drive is sold separately. It doesn't even include the $30 stand to sit it up vertically,
Yeah.
which is
Hmm.
the only way a PS5 looks good is standing up vertically. Um, they don't include the stand in the box. You have to buy that separately. Like it's it's just all these like small little costs that they cut from this thing that I'm like, why? Why couldn't you throw the $30 stand at the very least in here?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
that part is insane to me.
Yeah, I
I,
agree.
it's also worth noting that, to the point about a lack of software to sell it, I do think we have to assume that the PS5 Pro was something that they had planned on doing at some point.
Yeah.
And if we think about, and for years have planned on doing, and when you think about kind of the lack of first party software and the amount of remakes, not remake, remasters they've been thrown out, it's interesting to look back because we know that originally they were planning on having two God of War games. For those who don't know, originally the new God of War, starting with the 2018 game, was supposed to be a trilogy, and Sony Santa Monica made the decision to condense the two games into one and make it a duology. So presumably Sony was planning on having another God of War game. Presumably they were also planning on having some sort of Naughty Dog output. Who knows what's going on back
They
there?
they have had Naughty Dog output. They put out The Last of Us
Y-
Part 1 and The
No, you,
Last of Us Part 2 remaster.
I'm pretty sure
I
that,
know. I'm
especially, and they were also probably planning on having from studios that they bought, particularly Bungie, which, if you've been following what the news we've been learning about Bungie had multiple offshoot projects that apparently all got canned. And the only thing that's still coming out for sure is Marathon. And now it seems like Sony is moving in and just completely taking over the studio under their own to try to actually get something out. So I
well, it's
think
all
Sony had anticipating having a lot more actual new software out.
yeah, I mean, like it, that's also like kind of part of. I feel like that's a branch off because of kind of the failure, the massive, massive failure of Concord. Sony was betting big on live service games. They had, I think, at one point, Jim Ryan, I think, was still with the company and said that like they had 12 live service games that they were planning to have
Hmm.
out by like 2026, and then that got halved maybe 2 years ago.
And that plays into
And
both Naughty Dog and Bungie because we know Naughty
right,
Dog was working on a live service Last of Us multiplayer. We know that Bungie was quote unquote not supervising, like advising,
consulting.
consulting. Yeah.
Yeah, they were consulting on it and they said, "Yeah, this isn't good." And that got canceled. And now Concord came out and then got completely wiped off the map 2 weeks later, and now the studio is closed. And Sony bought them like a year ago.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's like very dire over on the PlayStation side of things. I mean, I feel like it's not so much better on Xbox's side for reasons that kind of go out of the bounds of this question, but like as far as Sony's concerned, yeah, this PS5 Pro like release, it's just like
It was probably
it's
something they had to do because they'd spent so much money down ahead of time that it would have been an even bigger loss not to put it out.
yeah, and there's a lot of concerns about for in lieu of recent events, there's lots of concerns about costs next year. Or starting next year, with certain additional taxes and tariffs coming into play that might make this stuff skyrocket in price. So it's like $700 for a PS5 Pro is already really expensive, but better for them to get it out now and hopefully sell some units before they have to start raising the price in a year or two, because it's not like they haven't already been doing that with PS5 has gone up in most other territories besides the US by like 50, the equivalent of like $50.
Right.
um and they didn't do that here because they knew they wouldn't be able to get away with it.
So it's
There
just the
would be
biggest
so
market.
much,
You're right.
yeah, there would be so much backlash if they raised the price of the PS5 here, the base PS5 here. But they might not have a choice next year. They might have to start raising the prices.
Right. That also
And
goes into again that larger conversation that people have been having of price, like generally prices of games. Because if you're old enough, you can remember when cartridge games, you know,
oh,
there wasn't even a uniform price. Like they could cost like $100, and some of them
yeah.
would cost less depending on who it was, what they were making.
Yeah,
It
go look
was
up
it.
an old like Toys
Yeah.
R Us ad from like 1998. It'll
Yeah.
shock you.
Yeah. And the fact that we have a standardized price across games for the most part, and that they're pretty cheap regardless of how much money is going into the game and how much time and man hours. It's kind of miraculous it stayed the way it is for so long,
Yeah.
basically since like the PS2 days
Yeah.
till today. And it's
For
only gone
sure.
up since PS2. What was it, $49.99 back in those days?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
PS2, like PS3 was when it really started like becoming regulated at like 59.99 typically, and then that price point lasted two whole generations.
Mm-hmm.
right,
So you think about that. That's like you could argue starting with like Xbox 360 in 2005, like 2005 to 2020 was how long we were spending $60 for most AAA video games. And the budgets only got bigger and bigger and bigger in that 15-year window.
right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna get it. If someone buys it for me, am I gonna play it? Sure. And you know what? They're not the only ones guilty of this. I feel like Nintendo iterates on their hardware a lot too. Well, like I think about like the 3DS and then the 3DSi, and I don't know. They have all these like other things where the difference is like a battery life or
easy. There was
uh
Right.
the 3DS, then the 3DS XL, then the
Excel.
new 3DS and new 3DS
Right.
XL. Then there
Exactly.
was the 2DS, which was basically a door stopper that could play 3DS games, uh, not
Yes.
in 3D.
Yeah, and they did the same thing with the Switch. The Switch has like they did like a battery upgrade and then they did an OLED screen and
No.
so like they do all these things that they could have lumped in together, but people buy them and it is what it is. At the end of the day, just don't buy it.
But
But at the same time, um I feel like at a certain point the price is becoming it's just worth getting a PC at that
Yeah.
point.
yeah.
The
And
only
PC
reason,
gaming has become so popular now that it's
and
just becoming
ubiquitous,
less
especially amongst the
right.
the younger
Or
generations. Yeah.
even not even that. I mean, hell, fuck a PC. You could buy a Steam Deck.
Well, right.
And
Yeah. It's
then
just
you have the PC aspect, but it's portable and you can get a dock and you can hook it up to your monitor or your TV. It's like it feels so much smarter to just do that in lieu of getting a PS5 Pro.
right.
Yeah.
And
Especially because let's not forget, like in a year after any PS5 game comes out, it comes to PC.
yeah,
Yeah.
Um,
the only reason I even started kind of getting into like the pricing and like comparing it to old generations and the way that standardized, was because of that last part, which I quite frankly find more interesting than the PS5 Pro itself, just the generation so far.
yeah.
You're starting to see a lot of these like pre-order and special editions that are like literally $100 plus for AAA games. I wouldn't be surprised because there's only so many studios you can like shut down after you launch a game, fire everybody. Yeah, at some point you gotta actually have you gotta stop and actually have people to make your fucking games. We might
Yeah.
get to a point where some of these AAA games that have these ridiculous budgets and take a decade to make might start costing $100+ out of necessity, not because they want to loop people in with pre-orders.
I mean,
We
you know
might we
what?
might get to a point where we have a middle market again, like we did, back in the PS2 days, which I'm honestly looking forward to.
I
It,
mean,
it's a much more competitive. It makes for a much more competitive and creative market.
we still do get like there just to be clear, there are still games that launch today that are like $50, $60, even less than that. It's usually like physical indie games like will get like a 30 or $40 like price point. But like Astrobot, I think Astrobot was a $60 game. A lot of the other like smaller games that like Square Enix has been putting out, like they'll release them for 50 or $60, as opposed to like full $70 games. Like that middle market kind of is here already.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And just because I was going to connect it with thoughts on this generation, like you talk about
Mhm.
middle market, and a lot of people point out to the Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2,
Yeah, yeah.
which is literally a sequel to a game from that middle market back in the day.
But the difference
And
there is that is still a $70 game.
it is, but it's also a game where like they're continuing to update it for free, basically, with some
Yeah.
minor cosmetic purchases if you so wish. I bought the special edition, so any of the shit basically, it's not battle pass is the point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Games are also already kind of $100 if you think about DLCs and stuff like that. Like we're the amount that we're putting into each title is already around that price point. So if they charge $100 and we get everything, I'll be happy with that, I think.
Oh, for sure. I'm not against raising prices. In fact, I would rather them raise prices on games than this fucking battle pass bullshit that I'm
Yeah.
absolutely sick of
Yeah.
in every sense of the word.
Yeah. All right. I mean, the last thing I'll say about the PS5 Pro is the only way you were going to get me to buy one, and I was at the ready, was to get that anniversary edition, the
Yeah, that
30th
was hot.
anniversary. Yeah, I tried. I really tried. I got stuck in the queue for like 45 minutes before finally getting through and it being sold out. So,
They knew what they were doing though, because they could have
yeah.
totally sold those faceplates separately
Oh,
and the
yeah.
controller separately, and people would have bought them.
And to talk about another like shitty thing about the Pro, we finally got confirmation now that it's actually out that the Pro the faceplates people were kind of thinking that the ones that work with the slim PS5 would work with the Pro. They don't.
Mm,
You will have to buy dedicated Pro faceplates. So there's like no interchangeability. I think that is like a greedier move than setting the price at $700. Like there was no reason for that. You guys could have made them compatible between both systems and they just
mm,
didn't because it means that people will have to buy dedicated plates.
yeah.
But at least the fucking disk drive, the $80 disk drive works with both, so
Does the $80 disc
fantastic.
drive work with the original PS5
No.
digital?
No,
Oh, wow.
because that one that was like a standalone, like you either buy the PS5 with the disk drive or you buy
You're
the
committed.
PS5 without the disk drive. The
Yeah.
Slim was the only one where it's like we're gonna put out just a we're gonna put out the digital SKU and then you can buy the disk drive to add on
Mm,
later if you so wish. Um,
cool.
yeah. So yeah, that I guess long tangent about the PS5 Pro, but
Well, we
it's
got to the second part of the question, which I
Oh,
found
shoot,
more
I
yeah.
more
forgot there
interesting.
was a second part.
No,
I
Yeah.
mean,
that's what I was trying to get at
I
was
feel like
what do you think of
we
a generation?
really
Yeah,
went like pretty broad on that. Like
we kind of
it's
give a broad commentary on the status of the game industry as a whole. Yeah,
I guess to just sum it up, like this whole generation, it really kind of has been disappointing. It's like it's taken a while before we finally gotten games that feel like new gen, current gen, and even then it's like there's diminishing returns with every generation. Like I was alluding to, like
right,
the mid-gen refresh for PS4 was justified because it was a drastic leap in graphical fidelity. This isn't, and even a lot of the games that are coming out, they look better, but not that much better than like late PS4
right.
games.
Right, like, the reason that Space Marine 2 felt so refreshing to a lot of people was, A, the gameplay was a throwback to, 360 era gameplay that people, were very nostalgic for, but also not because it necessarily looked better than anything that was out. It used it in a creative way with kind of the swarm tech for the Tyranids and the enemies in the game. That combined with that throwback to the old school third person over the shoulder action games from a bygone era really resonated with people.
The
So
thing, like,
it wasn't necessarily the fidelity of the game itself, although it does look good. But
that, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, this generation has a lot of good games, but a lot of them have been kind of like indie-ish or just kind of old school and linear. And I like that personally because I kind of miss that structure. But you're right, like the sort of like that first party Sony kind of like uptick we had in the PS4 generation is a lot slower this year, and I'm kind of okay with it because I was kind of tired of it, to be honest. Like, I
Yeah,
got
right.
tired of let's focus on graphics and cinematics rather than gameplay and story. Not to say those games didn't, they certainly did, but I kind of like that we're focusing more on like the smaller, more indie titles now, or the more old school things.
I
And
mean,
it's I think it's changed the kind of the way people are making games now, which I appreciate.
like I feel like the biggest thing that like the biggest innovation that Sony hasn't really leaned into much is the controller. And like realistically, this generation, the most innovative title that PlayStation Studios has put out was 2021's Returnal.
Mm.
That was the most innovative game they've put out because it
Mhm.
made use of this fucking brilliant controller they put out. Like,
Yeah.
pressing the trigger halfway has a different effect than pressing the trigger the full way. There's tension in those triggers.
Mhm.
Like, there's haptics in that controller that pop that do things when you're in the middle of the game. It's like that game was phenomenal, and that came out 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, Astrobot did it too, but
Astrobot's like a close second, right? Either Astro's Playroom or Astrobot, and like that game just came out, but like that's a smaller budget title that doesn't stand toe to toe sales wise or marketing wise with like God of War or Horizon. But like it's so much more innovative in so many more ways, and the design of that game is phenomenal. It's
yeah,
still easily my game of the year this year,
I
and
freaking love Returnal. Oh my god.
yeah, well, yeah, Returnal was amazing. But like, yeah, like there's just this lack of innovation with this generation, and like the answer is like it's in everyone's hands. Like, make use of that fucking controller.
You know
But
what's
then again,
funny?
they haven't been putting out enough games to do so with. So what's up?
Space Marine 2 actually used the
Yeah.
haptics
I was
better
gonna say.
than most of the
Yeah.
PlayStation first party titles. Like, so you know how like in Fallout 4 there's the power armor and you feel extra heavy?
Yeah.
So you feel that in the haptics when you're playing as the Space Marine 2 characters. Like you feel every single thump. And it feels crazy. It's actually really cool. But again, that's not a first party Sony title.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really enhances that power fantasy. God, that
Yeah.
game is so fucking good.
Yeah, it's fun.
Also, to make mention of like, you brought up like a lot of the best games this gen have been indies. Yeah, I just played one of my favorite games in recent memory. It didn't come out this year, it came out like 2 years ago. But I just played through Signalis. I actually came really close to telling you guys like we should do an episode on
I'd
this
be down.
game. I feel like no one will listen to that episode. Like 5 people would be interested in listening to that episode, but I don't care because that game fucking ruled. It's like a PS1 inspired survival horror game, and it's
Mhm.
got like the most out there story that required me to like look up a bunch of different like interpretations on people's personal blogs and stuff to kind of make any sense of like what I just experienced. But like, holy
Wow.
shit, if it wasn't incredible. Like, that game was so good. I would love to
Yeah.
talk about it with you guys.
I'd be down. I heard a lot of good things about that game too.
Yeah, it was really, really something. Hey Delilah, why don't you take the next one?
Oh boy, am I equipped to talk about this?
Yeah, that's why I picked you.
This is from, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Jehudi MD on Twitter. What does your backlog look like and how do you decide to chip away at it? So I'm gonna plug a video that I made a little bit on YouTube of 10 ways to get through your backlog to be more it's very like it goes into a lot of details, but in a nutshell, I don't consider games that I haven't bought with my own money part of my backlog. So that's one way that I chip away at it. And as of now, as I'm speaking, there's maybe like 5 or less games on that backlog, and most of them are games like I said before, Dark Souls 1 and Kingdom Hearts. They're games that I've played already. I just want to replay them or get the platinum for them. So there's really no like need to play it as soon as possible. If I get a game on Game Pass or like PlayStation, I just don't even consider it part of my backlog unless I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start playing this. So how do I chip away at it is when I do play a new game or when I buy a new game, I make sure that I beat that game and so that the backlog doesn't grow. And if there's games that I'm interested in, I keep a list of it, but I don't necessarily call it my backlog because then I'll get overwhelmed because there's a lot of games that I either want to go back to or games that I haven't played that I want to experience that, I don't know when I'll be able to do that because I'm always trying to focus on what's more recent for either the sake of the podcast or just for myself. I like to talk about all the games that came out this year, and I won't be able to do that if I don't finish the games that came out within a year. So Usually around the holiday time, it's a little slower, so I could start to chip away at the backlog. There used to be summers to do that, and nowadays there's not. Nowadays, a lot of games come out in the summer, so that kind of took away from that opportunity to chip away at the backlog during summers. So yeah, I kind of just do it when I can, and I don't put too much pressure on myself, and I don't have a very big backlog because I don't buy games unless I plan to finish them.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp where I don't really keep like a backlog. Like I have things that maybe I know of, but and I'm slightly interested. For example, like Metaphor, um, the Atlas game that just came out. Like I was kind of like, maybe I'll get around to it, maybe I won't. I've kind of leaned more into the get around to it and play it as we were just talking about.
I think there
But
also
like,
is a demo, by the way, if you wanted to try out the demo.
no, there is
I'll throw that
there's a
out
free
there.
demo. Yeah,
Okay.
I just haven't gotten around to it.
That's
But
fine.
like something I still have on my thing, like Baldur's Gate. I have Baldur's Gate 3 specifically. I have yet to finish a campaign, a full campaign all the way through the story. Every time I sit down to play it, I end up starting a new character and starting from the. I've been through Act 1. I can't tell you how many times.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but like I don't consider that part of my backlog. Like I've put 100+ hours into the game. Like I've gotten well my money's worth. I don't like feel some hole in my heart because I haven't finished the full story. Um, so I'm kind of the same way. The same thing with like we mentioned Red Dead earlier. I never actually finished. I know what happens in the story. I've never actually
Yeah.
finished Red Dead 2. Um,
Oh, okay.
just because of how overwhelming that game could be. I actually don't like story wise. I think it's fantastic. But in terms of like gameplay, I never loved it the same way I loved the first one. But I don't consider it like my backlog. I might go back and especially if we do an episode on it, I might go back and finish playing. Um, but I don't really have like a backlog like that. It's kind of like if I have time to play something, I'll play it. If there's something I'm really anticipating, I'll play it when it comes out. If not, I might wait a bit. Kind of like
Mhm.
touch and go, wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah. It must be nice to not have a backlog because I mean, this is an audio show, so y'all can't see what's behind me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I
So
mean, I
you
have I have
do.
something similar to that with books, which is like another thing that
Yeah.
contributes. Like I got a bunch of books that I need to finish reading. I got a bunch of well, actually, no, not movies. I've seen everything that's worth seeing under the sun. No, but I've got other like things that contribute to it. And as Delilah pointed out, we're adults. We got jobs as well.
Yeah.
The
Regrettably.
backlog is a mental thing, right? Like
Hmm.
a backlog's there if you want it to be, or if you put that pressure on yourself. If you don't put that pressure on yourself, then you're fine. Like just play what you want to play. It's just be careful how you spend your money. That's it. And so
Yeah.
my question to Mark is like, have you not played all those games behind you? 'Cause that's a lot of
Oh
games.
hell no! I haven't played all these games. Are you kidding me? Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I
that would
there's
drive
not
me
enough
crazy.
there's not enough time in the world to play all these games behind me. I wish I had all that time, but like I guess like how I prioritize my backlog, besides again the obvious answer of what whatever we're doing for this show, which i- does contribute a lot. Like that is a big contributing factor to how I prioritize my games because especially when we come to these discuss I mean if you're a Reap the Spoils listener, it's no secret to you when I come into an episode, there's lots of times where I'm like, okay, so I played through it like 3 times so I could get all the endings. I'm gonna talk through every single one. Which one did you guys get? Okay, here's the others and like all that shit. Like and it's not like I know I don't need to do that, but I like to do that because there's also that completionist aspect that Delilah and I have shared and rivaled over for how like pretty much the entirety of our friendship. Where I still genuinely like to trophy hunt. I still genuinely like to get platinum trophies. I still find a lot of fun in that. Um, and that takes up a lot of time. So like a lot of
Yeah.
times when we do an episode for the show, like yeah, that is a huge contributing factor to my backlog of okay, what else am I going to have time for within the month based on how long it's going to take me to do this game to completion so I can talk about it. That was like and that was very taxing earlier this year because did Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and then Dragon's Dogma 2 and then Stellar Blade. And 7 Rebirth alone took like 240 hours to 100%. And
You got the
then
platinum in that game?
yeah,
You monster.
I don't do it. Just
Yeah.
don't do it. Anyone listening, do not do it to yourself.
See, just to give people an idea of where I'm coming from here, I only ever platinumed one game. I was reviewing it for a website, and that was Fallout 4.
Yeah, that was Fallout 4.
And I never platinumed another game again.
Yeah.
No, the thing is, if you want to get through your backlog, it's more effective if you don't 100% games.
100,
That's a
yeah,
fact.
absolutely, and that's why I have this massive wall of games behind me, and I'll never play them in my lifetime because, doing that is just it's a lot of work. It's a lot of commitment, and it takes a lot of research and a lot of motivation to actually get around to it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that's a big factor for me. Another, factor, there is like still that idea of whatever I feel like playing, right now some of the most urgent things on my backlog to get to list are like really old JRPGs. After Metaphor, I do want to, like I said, I was talking about earlier, I want to commit and finish Final Fantasy VIII because that's the last one besides 11 that I have never actually beaten. So I need to do that. And then like another one is also regrettably, I've never completed Chrono Trigger. Actually, that would have been a really good game to bring up for that first question too. I never beat Chrono Trigger. I really want to get to that. So
I've been wanting to replay that game.
yeah. It's a great game. You know what else is a great game that was a predecessor to Chrono Trigger that I've been telling you guys that I want to do an episode on for like a year or two now?
Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's on PlayStation, guys. We could do Live Alive. Let's do it. I would love it. I would
Isn't
love
it
it.
Live Alive? Oh, who cares?
Live Alive. It's
Live Alive. Okay.
Raibu or Raibu.
Okay.
Live Alive. Anyway, so yeah, like that's the other thing that like my backlog is I'm very bad at keeping track of my backlog. Like I actually was like planning out what games I was going to play once I got back from my honeymoon. And then I remembered that Metaphor came out right before I got married and I really wanted to play it. So that's what I'm playing now because I remembered, oh yeah, there's this 100-hour RPG that I was really excited about. I should probably get to that before I play this video game that came out in 1999. So
right.
It's like I got to get better at keeping track of my backlog, especially when I have this overwhelming mess behind me.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle. It's a struggle as a gamer. And then it's also difficult, like Jason, you brought up books, movies, television shows, like those are all things that me and my wife like to do is we like to watch a lot of movies and we like to watch a lot of shows, and like juggling those on top of juggling a backlog of video games, it's very difficult. It can be really hard to keep track of and to manage the time. So what does my backlog look like? It looks like just screams. Just imagine an echo chamber of screams. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's why I try to like always finish things as they come out
and only buy it as it. Yeah, I have a feeling Delilah and I are kind of on the same wavelength. Although she'll go much farther to actually finish something. For me, I'm a free bird. If it doesn't keep my attention, I'm rolling on.
What I will say, what I will add, this is something that I've started adopting in recent years. If it's not a game that I am planning to play right away, I will not buy it right away.
Yeah, like, that's smart.
But I didn't used to do that. I didn't always used to do that. I used to buy, like if I knew there was a game that I wanted, I would still buy it right at launch, full price, and then not touch it for months, years. To a point
as evidenced
where,
by the shelves upon shelves of physical games, and
then
exactly.
It's like, well, fuck. If I had waited a few years, I could have gotten Cyberpunk 2077 for like $20 versus the $60 that I paid for it at launch.
Yep,
why
or
did
it'll
I?
come out on Game Pass or whatever, or you'll be able to get it for free on
Yeah, with the
PlayStation
complete
Plus.
Yeah,
edition with the DLC, and now that the game is actually finished, and very good game. If you haven't got if to people listening, if you
yeah.
haven't gotten back in this Cyberpunk 2077 because of the way it launched, get back in,
Did we do an
especially with the
episode on
DLC.
that?
No,
No,
I'd be willing to do an episode
Oh.
because that game fucking rocks.
that's
Oh,
a
it
that's
does.
that's another like 1 to 200 hour video game to commit
Well,
to.
well, for
Mhm.
you, for the completionist, like,
Yeah, yeah.
you can get through it in like 40,
Hey,
50, 60 hours, including the DLC if you're just doing primarily the story.
yeah. Uh, but yeah, like I've started adopting that mentality where if I'm not planning on playing it right away, especially like for Ubisoft games, like I'm kind of interested in maybe getting Star Wars Outlaws, but Ubisoft games go on sale less than a month after they release.
Yeah.
There's literally no reason to buy it right away, even if you are planning on playing it right away. Just like wait 3 weeks and it'll be on sale.
Yeah, especially if you have other games that you already purchased, might as well prioritize those and wait for games to go
Yeah.
on sale.
And things also start getting murky when you consider like I also like collector's editions. I like big boxes that have extra trinkets in them.
Yes.
Most of the time you cannot wait on those.
No,
It's very FOMO driven. If you don't buy it, you don't get it, or
it's
you don't get
true.
it at the price that it retails for. So
Mhm.
it's a difficult balance. It's tricky.
Yeah.
So for the one that I am kind of taking a risk on, but they typically don't sell out. I really want to get Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. I want to get that collectors, but they don't typically sell out, so I'm kind of like holding on that one and seeing
Yeah, I mean,
when
who
the
could
time is
catch
right.
up on the Yakuza series? That's
Oh
like a
my
dream
god.
come true.
Well,
I
like a
re-
Dragon that's like this. Did they already come out with the second one? I don't know. Either way, it's kind of a new series. My understanding.
but
They're
also
tying in Kiryu.
yeah, like Kiryu's a main character in Infinite Wealth. It's like
Oh, okay.
you can play it, I guess, without having played like 0 through 6, but it's like you should probably play through 0 through 6
Yeah, because
to have Kiryu's story.
my understanding was on top of a new protagonist and a new gameplay style. It was just a new story that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have that first one, and I did play some of it. I just don't really remember.
From what I understand, like a Yakuza Like a Dragon was like
It's turn based.
yeah, well, like
Yeah.
my point being is like that one was pretty like you could play through that and get a lot out of it without having played all the others. But
Mm.
from what I hear of Infinite Wealth, it's now like kind of reincorporated Kiryu as like a primary character in that game, and not having the context of like what 20 years of history with that character
Yeah.
is like you're doing a disservice to yourself by playing it without having played all the others.
Yeah.
So yeah, Delilah, like I actually really want to catch up on or play more of those. I would love to do episodes on the other ones eventually.
I would
But
love to do one on Zero.
there are so many of them, and to do everything in them takes so long per game.
Mhm.
And it's like that's a situation where it's like it's really worth doing because a lot of the sub stories and like we did an episode on Kiwami, like the remake of Yakuza 1, and like those sub stories were fantastic. Like
It's so
not
good.
doing them is like missing out on some of the best parts of that game.
Yeah.
Um so it's definitely a struggle for that series in particular.
Mhm. Yep.
um
And they
but
keep releasing them annually.
I know that studio's got it down pat. Another Sega owned studio. Sega's really killing it, man.
Yeah.
It's like they also got Sonic putting
Sega,
those out on.
Capcom. Yeah.
Yeah. Jason, the next one's real easy. You want to take it?
Yeah, so I was just gonna mention, like, do you want me to just read these next three because these all kind of play, and it's basically the same question, kind
Yeah.
of.
I mean, yeah, you can read the next one, and then the two after that are actually from the same guy.
Okay,
Um,
so the next one's from underscore gaming at real ob gaming on Twitter, and he asks, Is the October pod on the way?
It's out.
Yes, it is. It's out. Yeah.
I feel like there was no reason to include this one, but I decided to just to be cheeky. But yeah, we did an episode on Dead Space 2. That was our October episode. Go listen to it.
You want me to just continue with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
next two from
Read the two from Luke. I mean, it's essentially
Lukey
the same
Luke?
stuff, but
Yeah, Lukey Luke at Luke1989 underscore 1989 on Twitter. Is it Silent Hill this month on the podcast? I also
I
wonder when they'll be
wish.
doing the Resident Evil 5 spoiler. It must be soon. And then via
Delilah,
email.
you are gonna eat those words if we ever do an
Yeah.
episode on Silent Hill 2 and I play that remake. You're
So
you're gonna be in Silent Hill after I get on the episode.
He also said via email, "Hi, I hope I haven't left it too late. I just want to say your pod is probably the best pod I listen to. Brilliant energy.
So
The
nice.
deep dive into all the gamings are brilliant. All games, my bad. All your opinions are proper good. And when is the Resi 5 spoiler coming? Just thanks for the... Oh, wait a minute. I forgot. Smiling with tears emoji. Just thanks for the work you do. It's awesome. Luke."
I'm actually
Luke,
really impressed that the emojis copied over into Google Docs.
True.
Perfectly.
Also,
Sorry.
Luke is definitely from the UK, right? You
I-
gotta be, bud.
I think so, yeah. Also, I do want to call out. So I think Luke actually added me on PSN, which is fine. The problem is I didn't realize that until I got his email and recognized, or he put his PSN ID in his email. It's cool if fans want to add us on or add me on PSN. Like, I don't really mind that. I don't really care about that. Just make sure you put in a note or a message saying that you're a fan of the show or something, so I know who you are. Because I initially rejected his friend request and he sent me another. Because I didn't know who he was and I didn't know why he was adding me. So yeah, I don't care if you add me on PSN. Just make sure you put in a little note telling me who you are, so I don't think that you're just some random person or a bot or something, you know?
Yeah, he may have added me too, but I get a bunch of like random creeps that add me, so I always decline everything if I don't know the person. So
Whoa,
my bad,
gamer
Lukey Luke.
girl. Whoa.
Yeah, doesn't happen as much nowadays, but
Yeah.
I'm a
sometimes.
loser. Nobody ever friends me.
Aw.
Actually, I still have some random people from Destiny 1 that I found
Oh,
on like an
wow.
LFG. I raided with them. They were
Nice.
pretty cool, but I mean, we've never interacted ever since that one day. So
Yeah.
Pro tip
Anyway,
though, for people in general, if you want to like, if you're, this is not applicable to us because we're just like regular ass people. But like, if you do add a content creator, you want to like, just you could follow them on the PSN without sending a friend request if you want to like follow
Yeah.
their trophies and stuff like that. So I just encourage that for people moving forward because sometimes content creators, not us at all, they get like inundated with requests and they're just going to decline or ignore it, not because they're dicks, but because it's just a lot. So
yeah.
you can just
And
follow.
to answer Luke's question, I mean, we already answered that. We just released for October the Dead Space 2 spoiler cast,
I
but
do want to expound
we'll
on that at some
definitely
point.
we'll definitely be getting to Resident Evil 5, and it looks more and more like we'll be getting to Silent Hill, the new remake. So, I mean, Delilah seems to really want to do it. I haven't touched it yet. Mark
Listen.
has reservations.
Listen to me. So look, I've always wanted to do an episode on Silent Hill 2. Because Silent Hill 2, the PS2 video game released in 2001, is one of the best, if not the best survival horror games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing video game, and what it does within the confines of the medium is nothing short of incredible. I have a lot of reservations about this remake. I have a lot of even so, like, I've kind of come around a little bit and I'm more open to playing it. I personally, or at this point in time, don't want to give Konami a full $70 to buy a remake of a game that they have done jack shit to preserve the original.
Mm.
That's ultimately what my problem with this whole situation comes down to, is that you cannot play original Silent Hill 2 without like emulating, torrenting, stealing it. There's not really any legitimate way to play the original game. Even the HD collection that came out in like 2012 for PS3 and Xbox 360, it was a remade remaster because they lost the original source code. And if you know anything about that HD remaster, it's the worst way to
Garbage.
ever play that. Yeah, it's garbage. It's terrible. It's like they use Comic Sans font on like some of the signs. They recast all the actors and they don't sound right. Fucking Troy Baker is James Sunderland. Give me a fucking break. Um and it's just it's not a good way to play that game. It's not a good way to experience that experience. Um, and now they got Bloober Team, which Bloober seemingly pulled it off and made a good game, and that's great. My
Yes.
problem is ultimately with Konami not preserving the original, and I don't want to give them
Right.
$70 for this remake.
Right.
I am either waiting for it to go on sale or I'm buying it secondhand. That's kind of where I'm at with this. And no matter what, at the end of the day, if I play it, it's probably not going to edge out the original. Everything I've seen, I am not looking at it like, man, that looks amazing. Like this is now the new way to play. No, the way to play Silent Hill 2 is to play 2001's Silent Hill 2 on PS2.
Fair enough.
And I hope that I'm not like too much of a curmudgeon when we do inevitably get around to playing and doing an episode on Silent Hill 2. Because at the end of the day, the thing that I most want to talk or do an episode on is that game's story.
Yeah.
The plot of
Right.
Silent Hill 2 is ultimately what I want to talk about most because it is such a special story.
Right. And outside of the episode Mark had us do for the first one, the original Silent Hill, I have zero, and I barely remember that. I have zero experience with the series.
Yeah,
So
and like the good news is like Jason, Silent Hill 2 is extremely disconnected from Silent Hill 1. Like
right, I
you
believe,
don't
yeah, you mentioned that,
yeah,
yeah.
it's very standalone. You don't have to have played 1 to do anything with 2. They basically have next to nothing to do with one another other than being set in the eponymous town. Um
Yeah.
and
I,
it's like
I respect it.
yeah, I think like, sorry to be kind of a downer about it, but like
That's fine.
I can kind of see what you're saying. From what I remember of playing through the PlayStation 1 version of not version, the only version of the first one on from
mhm,
PS1, very much an experience, an artistic vision that you can sense even through the outdated graphics and gameplay,
yeah.
quote unquote outdated. There's definitely a vibe to it, so I can kind of, even though I've never played two back in the day, I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like the thing that I've said since they revealed the remake of Silent Hill 2 is that like they modernize the gameplay, and that's like a weird thing to complain about, but the problem I have with that is like Silent Hill was never about the gameplay. Like
Right,
making it your bog standard typical over the shoulder third person shooter does nothing for me because I don't play Silent Hill 2 to have clunky mechanics or some of the most basic by the book combat you could have in like a not late 90s early 2000s
right.
survival horror
The
game.
Resident Evil remake uh, isn't gonna fly with, like, just
Right.
using that template for Silent Hill isn't gonna fly.
Right, because Silent Hills has never been about the gameplay. It's been about the atmosphere, it's about the story, it's about the frights, the soundtrack. It's about like everything visually, the presentation. It's much more about the presentation than it is about the mechanics. Whereas Resident Evil is the exact opposite. And that's why, like to your point, that's why it's worked with these Resident Evil remakes.
I will say, like having played it,
Mhm.
just for a peace of mind,
Yeah.
it is still very much so about those things, and the combat doesn't. It does. It's not even like they. So like in the original Silent Hill, combat was optional. You could just run past enemies, right? Like if you wanted to.
In most
Um,
cases, yeah.
in most cases, whereas here's there are more obstacles, but there's still like less of a focus on gunplay. It's not like James feels like Leon, where he's like this trained combat soldier, shoulder, trained combat police officer. Sorry, I can never say the word
Policeman
shoulder.
officer.
Soldier. Yes, policeman officer. Or like combat trained. Period. He's still like a dude, and the way they implement the combat actually feels like uh like it did in the original. Like it's not like top down, but you get hit pretty hard and it takes a while to take these things down like it does in the original. So they do give it some service, like they do keep the spirit of that, but they do make the enemies more of obstacles, which might be annoying to you if you're just there for the atmosphere. But it's actually kind of creepy. It is probably one of the scariest games I played ever. The way they remade it, so I really 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 liked it, and I hope that you will too. But if you don't, I think it'll make a good discussion either
I
way.
mean, I hope that I like it too. It's definitely I'm not gonna go into that episode being, glowingly positive and being like this is the best way to play this game now. Like I'm probably not going to be doing that. I'm probably going to be for lack of better words, I'm going to be obnoxious.
Yeah, you're gonna be a
Um
purist, elitist.
yeah. It's not even that. Like I said, most of my issues don't go or aren't
It's
leveled at Bloober. They're leveled at Konami.
Yeah, it's not like when we did our Resident Evil 4 remake video where we went down a list of comparing the two. And if you wanted to, you can just pull up. I got in my collection the original Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation 5. I can just go play that if I really
Hey,
didn't like the remake. Yeah.
and that's the issue I have. Again, it's Konami not preserving that original game. Like even Metal Gear Solid Delta. It's like, yeah, do I think they needed to commission that remake? No, of course not. But at least I can go buy the Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection, and that HD remaster of Subsistence is included in there, and I can basically play original Snake Eater
Yeah,
today.
it's
No,
almost like playing the remake of Silent Hill 2 is just reminding you that Silent Hill 2 is lost to history basically.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
that's again, my issue is not with Bloober or that game specifically. It's with Konami taking this route versus properly preserving. So fans have done a better job preserving Silent Hill 2 than
Yeah.
Konami has. There's this whole fan project to make like I think it's like Silent Hill 2 Definitive Edition or something. It's like a fan mod of the PC port of the original release with like HD textures and like all this other stuff. And like honestly, if I had a PC, the two things I would immediately download are Final Fantasy 11 so I could play through Final Fantasy 11 and that Silent Hill 2 fan project.
Yeah.
Cuz that just sounds fucking awesome. That just sounds so
Kind of like
cool.
yeah, it sounds a lot like the in certain corners of the internet you can find certain 4K fan remastered editions of the original theatrical releases of the original Star Wars trilogy that
Yeah.
certain people don't want out.
I mean, yeah. I mean, a certain individual didn't, but he doesn't really get a say on anything anymore. But clearly, other people's viewpoints align with that, or maybe it was baked into the contract. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah. Going off of my my soapbox about Silent Hill though a little bit. Yeah, Resident Evil 5. Yeah, we we'll probably get to that sooner
We're
rather than
definitely
later.
getting to that at some point, yes.
I don't think we're gonna like. I don't know. Do you guys think we should wait for a remake of that? Because who knows? I don't know when that's coming. It could be years.
Yeah.
I
We
mean,
don't know what they're
who
doing
knows?
next.
They could have already been working on it and it just gets dumped at the Game Awards.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
It could
yeah,
be
but
like
I really doubt it.
I mean, I
I
doubt it. I'm
also
not saying it will. I am just saying it could be that
I
they've
mean,
been working on it
the
because
rumors are. Go ahead. Sorry.
with these remakes they've been doing, they've got the engine. Like all the hard parts are done. They've got the engine. Like really, they're just taking assets from the original and putting them in this new engine and kind of re. I guess for 5 it's a little different because of how different it is in terms of the structure of the game. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say something and I had a brain fart. Wow.
Don't
This
worry, it
happens
happens
to
to me
me
all the
like,
time.
oh, as you get older, it's just like the brain, you feel it not functioning. Um, you know what? Forget it. It's fine. It's
Um, I guess what we could do, we could always do an episode on Resident Evil 5
Oh yeah, I remember
2009
now.
and then do an episode on Resident Evil 5 2026, you know, and
Yeah, I
Right.
think if they remade Resident Evil 5, this is what I was gonna say before early onset of dementia kicked in. It won't be the same game. It's gonna be very different.
yeah.
It's
Or
almost gonna be like a whole new experience.
even if it's not like a whole new experience, right? Like even if it's like fairly close, like Resident Evil 4, our Resident Evil 4 episode, we did talk about the original and the remake
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
side
pretty
to
much
side
in parallel.
comparisons. Yeah.
And that was pretty easy to do because the Resident Evil 4 remake really expanded on the bare bones plot that 4 had in a lot of really, really phenomenal ways. So like that was pretty easy. But 5 is a lot more like plot heavy. There's a lot more like kind of thought put into that game's plot because it involves like
It's trying to tie together a lot of threads, not
yeah.
just from the main series, but from side games as well. Yeah.
But I think ultimately we might have to take that approach because I think we're going to be waiting a while. Um, since Resident Evil
And
3, they've kind of taken the remake, new game approach.
yeah, I've heard rumors of like an actual 9. I've heard
Yeah.
rumors of the Code Veronica, so who knows?
I mean, the Code Veronica one is pretty unfounded, though they really need to put that out before they do a Resident Evil 5 episode or a Resident Evil 5 remake because
Yeah.
uh, I don't like original Code Veronica like at all, but it is an important game within the Resident Evil canon.
Hmm.
So it's like you can't really skip over it.
And because these new remakes seem to be retconning the stories, and I don't mean that in a negative way. They're trying to more thoroughly tie everything together and
It's
make
its
a
own
set a set.
continuity.
Well, they're trying to make a new set canon, I think, that will tie into the newer games, I suppose. Although you can go look at our episodes on those games for that kind of discussion. But so
I
who knows? They might be trying to change things to create kind of a new central canon that everything flows through. Who knows?
yeah, which game do you think like Chris and the gang are gonna have to fight like the fake ghosts and stuff that are trying to keep the events like going along the original canon and they're trying to fight against fate. Like what game do you think that's gonna happen in? I'm making a really bad Final Fantasy VII
No.
remake joke.
Yeah, I know. I know.
You
I
just
wouldn't
seem
be.
so perplexed.
No,
The
no, no.
harbingers of dark and light of Resident Evil.
Well, it's just,
The harbingers of the T
I don't
virus.
know, I don't know how deep into this conversation we want to go because, like, I
No, you don't have
my
to go
hot,
deep. I
yeah,
was just making a bad joke.
my hot take is that Resident Evil 9 completely abandons the 7 and 8 timeline, and they just kind of quietly discard 6 and just pick up from wherever 5 leaves off.
Well,
Wow.
the rumor is, I guess spoilers if you don't want to hear about some unfounded rumors from a bunch of quote unquote gaming insiders, but rumor is that the Resident Evil 9 will star Jill and Leon, so
Yeah.
well and that's not just like one schmuck saying that on Twitter. Like a bunch of insiders, quote unquote, have said and corroborated that as the two leads for that game. So
It's also just the smart thing to do.
we'll see what happens, I guess. But yeah, as far as Resident Evil 5 goes, I guess stay tuned. Stay
Yeah.
tuned, Luke. We'll get it out eventually. We're not abandoning Resident Evil. At some point, I am going to want to play 6. So get ready for
Oh,
that.
fuck me.
No.
No, we're gonna have to play 6, guys. We have to play 6.
Lukey, Luke, thank you for the kind words too.
Yes, thank you,
Yes.
Luke. It really just warms my heart to have some of that positive feedback, that positivity about the show. At the end of the day, you know, we make it for you guys, so and for us. We make it for us. Actually, primarily we make it for us. You guys are a secondary consideration. No offense, but I'm happy that you like it.
Yes.
So we got this last question from Roymu7, and actually, we're gonna hold on to this one because this was a last minute addition to the question sheet, and it's a loaded one. It's gonna take some time. It's gonna take some thought, and next episode we're kind of just talking about the Game Awards,
So we
right?
could talk about it there. Yeah.
We
I
can
mean,
talk about
look,
it there.
Roymu, my man, or my girl, whatever, my they them, whatever you are. Why you
Roy
gotta
moved
write in so
7.
late to submissions with the most craziest deep dive question ever? You could have given us more time.
No,
But we got you,
that's
bro.
all
We
right.
got you. We
Cause
got
like,
you.
yeah, I don't want to cut this short because this is a really interesting one, and I actually do want to give this some thought because I feel like I could come up with like a whole system for answering this.
Yeah.
So I like it. I wanna give it the time it deserves. So we're gonna hold on to this one for next episode.
Can I ask him a question to his question though?
Go
Real
ahead.
quick.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Am I working during these time frames? Am I just is it just me in the video game? Like can I make up the
I'm gonna
scenario in my head?
I'm gonna go ahead and answer for Roymu here and say that it's probably like you get a year sabbatical, you get a month of the
Ooh.
question, and you know, let me read off the question for any listeners so that everyone knows what this is, so maybe they can think about this too, and then leave us comments on either this episode or next episode
Hmm.
telling us what your answers to this are. Roymu7 on YouTube wrote, this is a quick game we play around the dinner table sometimes. Questions are usually related to travel, but thought it would be fun to superimpose video games over the top. The answers are always really interesting. The game is answer the following questions as best you can and your reasons for doing so. If you had to choose one and only one game to play for one day, what would it be? And then the next three questions are the same question, but for a week, then for a month, and then for a year. So if you only had to choose a single game to play for a day, a week, a month, and a year, what would those games be, and why would you choose those games for that time period?
Getting existential,
Um,
folks.
they said the units of time can be whatever you choose. They usually do they also do 1 hour. If you want to do the bonus of what game, if you only could play one game for 1 hour, what would you do? But they also said the above seemed right for a video game version. I agree with that. So maybe let's stick to definitely one day, 1 week, 1 month, and 1 year. And they finished it saying, "Thanks, looking forward to the show, regardless of whether you answer the question or not. Your show is always my first point of reference for spoiler discussions. Thanks for all you do." You are quite
Cute.
welcome, Roymu.
Yeah.
You are quite welcome. Yeah, we are gonna answer the question, just not in this episode. We're gonna hold it for the next one so that we can give it the time it deserves because it does deserve more time.
Yeah.
Um, I guess well, we kind of already talked about games we're playing. Like, what are you even playing right now? You're just finishing up Black Myth Wukong?
Yeah, that and Echoes of Wisdom. And
Right, right,
I'm
right. Okay.
still like I started Hades before this like fall rush, so I'm probably gonna finish that
Okay.
after. Yeah.
Jason, what are you playing right now?
Been playing much. Like I said, I dipped back into Baldur's Gate 3 a couple times and just
Yeah.
restarted the first. I know that for a fact tonight I'm gonna go, and I suggest anybody who never experienced what Overwatch 1 was like on launch.
Yeah.
Overwatch 2 is free to play, and they do have Overwatch Classic debuting today. Um, so you can experience the original 21 heroes, what they were like on launch with 6v6, no caps on any heroes. Um, sure to be very chaotic and very fun.
Yeah. Blast from the past. I guess on that note, I didn't play this, but I read this on my honeymoon. I do want to give like a really big plug and recommendation to Jason Schreier's new book, Play Nice. The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. It was extremely good. Jason, I highly recommend you read this book. it really, really is phenomenal. I think
I've already seen excerpts and stuff from some. I've been paying much more attention to a lot of the Bungie stuff, listening to interviews with some people, with some folks. I'm waiting for his. Actually, I don't even know. Does he probably already has a Bungie book out? But I'm
no,
assuming
he the one Bungie thing was in his first book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, he did do a
a Destiny
chapter
one.
on
Yeah,
Destiny, yeah. But he's done like reports and articles and stuff on Destiny, like during his career at
yeah.
Kotaku and then Bloomberg
There's a
and stuff.
lot of stuff going around about Bungie, and
Yeah,
the YouTube channel, if you're familiar, the Act Man has done some really great interviews with Marty O'Donnell,
yeah.
who used to be
He was the composer, right?
chief composer, audio director, but also like game director. He's been there since was there since the mid '90s, so pretty early on. He was one of the founding 7 of the Bungie Inc. So
Gotcha. But yeah, Jason, or both of you really, like I bring up Jason because I know Jason, you're
oh
such
yeah,
a
I grew
big
up a
Blizzard
Blizzard
fan.
kid. Yeah,
Right, right. Like this book, it was really, really remarkable. I learned a lot of things I did not know about Blizzard. I think I know you know a lot about the history of the company, but I still think it's an enlightening read.
oh no, for sure. Like if I didn't already have like 7 books on my, not coffee table, but like my thing next to my couch next that I watch TV from, that I pull to
Yeah.
read, I'd probably buy it. I
Well,
might just get the audiobook and listen to it while I work.
yeah, I definitely recommend it. It's the audiobook is voiced by Ray Chase of Noctis, Final Fantasy 15 fame.
Oh.
Oh, never mind.
That's the best.
Man. But yeah, I read that on my honeymoon, and like I said, I recently played through Signalis, loved that, and I'm playing through Metaphor right now and loving that.
Yeah, I'm probably going to get on Metaphor, especially
Yeah.
now that we've kind of floated with the idea of doing an
Yeah.
episode on it.
I mean, try out the demo and see how you feel about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, if we're gonna do
I
an
watched the
episode
demo.
on it,
Yeah,
yeah, if we're gonna do an episode on it, it'll probably be like, a couple months from now because it is a long commitment.
yeah. I'm
Um,
assuming if it's like that Atlas template, it's pretty beefy. Yeah.
yeah, and I guess to prepare everybody for our next game episode, which probably wouldn't be done until January. Hey, Jason, what were we planning as our next game?
I don't remember which one was it we were
You
planning.
couldn't
Forgot to actually.
I thought, weren't we gonna do Fantasian, Neo Dimension?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, Fantasian. Yes,
The
sorry.
Return of the Gooch. Come on, man.
The Return of the King. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, after my feelings on FF7 Remake and Rebirth, I went and I lit the beacons of Gondor, and who came calling? Sakaguchi,
Sakaguchi.
the Gooch himself.
Yes. Yeah, so not next episode, but probably our first episode of the new year will probably be Fantasian Neo Dimension, the console release of Hironobu Sakaguchi's diorama JRPG. Very, very excited to giving that a full playthrough because I only played it a little bit on Apple Arcade. So
And this will be my first time because I don't buy Apple products.
yeah, you're not an Apple shill like I am. Oh. Anyway, yeah, if you liked this episode, if you're listening on YouTube, thank you so much. Anyone that wrote in, thank you. Like this was great. I had a lot of fun. It was
Me
really nice
too.
to get all these different questions, and it led to some really great discussions. Um,
Yeah.
Keep them coming. If you want to write in with a question and ask us something, do it.
Yeah, we
I'm
always
always
appreciate the interaction with the audience. We like to hear
yeah.
back from you guys.
I'm always open to hopping on with these two knuckleheads and just talking about
Because you're gonna say rascals. It's like
these
knuckleheads,
two
rascals,
these two
bozos.
rapscallions. I'm always open to hopping on and doing a quick episode or something just to talk about a really interesting listener question, or do another episode like this where we talk about a bunch of them. So like if you have a question, feel free to leave a comment on this episode. Tell us your question. Maybe we'll do another episode like this where we just read through a bunch of them. If you would prefer to email a question to us, you can send that at dcellmedia@gmail.com. That's dcellmedia@gmail.com. I'll put that in the description. If you and also if you listen on YouTube, like the episode, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, you know the drill. I don't have to tell you. Well, I do have to tell you. Statistically, you're more likely to do it if I tell you to do it. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Please rate and review the show, 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like. I hope that this episode was, less cause for some Jason hate. So don't leave us a review on this episode saying, oh, that Jason guy, he's got some real wonky opinions. Like, I don't know. He was pretty tame this episode. If anything, I was the one.
I feel like you're very much blowing. I feel like you're very much blowing this out of proportion.
It's because a lot of my personal friends that don't leave reviews or comments constantly, they just text me and they're like, what the fuck is Jason talking about? I'm like, oh, here we go again. What did he say this time? Oh, well, he said that this shit about Mass Effect or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, what are you gonna do?
Mass Effect. Fuck.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, that's all I got. This was a fun episode. I would love to do it again sometime. So yeah, write in your questions.
Yeah. So keep sending them in, like Delilah said. Send us questions about games as we announced that we're going to play them. So send us your questions about Fantasian as you play it.
Yeah, I'm going to make use of that community posts feature on YouTube more often. I think that's a cool feature.
Yeah, it is.
We're very technologically savvy here. We're very up to date on how podcasts work.
Definitely learning how all these social medias work in 2024. These features that have been on YouTube for years. I'm like, this is neat. This is nifty. I'm gonna use this once a month. But anyway, that's all I got. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Oh, damn.
Did you just kick her out?
Well, no, she was just like, starting off, I'm out of here.
I did not mean to do that. I thought I was ending the call for a second.